do not spend our time fellowshipping with people that clearly have no love for God. And that's one of the things that's very important about a church family, is that you have and develop friendships within that. In the prayer letter that Charles wrote, one of the things in Japan is the loneliness, because they don't have as many Christians to fellowship with. And so he said, you need to turn away from those people who are not living the way that God wants them to live. And so there's the foundation of what he's saying. This is what I'm talking about when I say difficult or perilous times will come. It's not talking about your refrigerator breaking down. It's talking about you're going to have more and more difficulty living the Christian life in this kind of a society, in this kind of culture. It's going to degenerate to the place where it's very difficult for you to live the way that you want to. Now, with that in mind, I want to use some of that to give you just a little nugget about translations. I want you to look at this, and you'll see there's a bulleted point at the bottom. Notice how many options one has in going from Greek to English. Sometimes there's not a single accurate word that captures the nuance of a word in its original language. The receptor language and the original language may not have an exact word. I mentioned this morning we have people who speak a lot of different languages in our church. And I would say that we can have those people stand and give examples for us of how difficult it is to go from, say, Mandarin to English. That sometimes you just don't have the exact word to go from one or the other. Spanish to English. Sometimes you've got to use more than one word. You've got to figure out, how do I get this into the receptor language? Because it just doesn't work exactly right. And so as you look down through this list, what I gave you in the list was actually the New American Standard Word, and a lot of times in parentheses beside it, I put the King James Word. And you'll see that what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, here's what it says in its original language. Now, how do I get it from this original language into the language, the receptor language, in our case to English? How do I clearly get from the Greek into English so that it says what it needs to say? Now, you run into a couple of problems. And the problems are that there are multiple choices at times for what word a person could use. I get the opportunity to speak through translators fairly often. I speak for Chinese church. Edmund did it today. I didn't do that. But I'll come and speak for Chinese church. And Janet will translate. Well, I imagine that if I had 4 people translating, you would come out with differences in all those translations. They wouldn't all do it exactly the same. They would say it a little differently. They would get it across. But they could all be trying to be accurate, but they might choose a different word. They might choose a different way to do that. But then there's a second thing. And that is that words sometimes change meaning, even within our society. We've looked at that before. Give me an example of a word that has changed meaning in even your life. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Ron? Gay. Yeah. There used to be, we'll have a gay old time. What was that? Flintstones. Yeah, the Flintstones. We'll have a gay old time. Well, at this point, we would not want to choose that word for the song. We would get rid of that. I mean, another example. Cool. Yeah. Well, cool may not have anything to do with temperature anymore. So words change meaning a little bit. And we've seen a couple of examples in this list. And so we want to be careful. We want to be honest about going from one language to a receptor language and make sure that we're communicating properly. As a matter of fact, I'll say this, that we have an obligation to make sure it gets from one language to another one accurately. And to fail to meet that obligation is a problematic area. I believe that at some point, if we've not been faithful in doing that, and we have the tools to do it, I think we'll have to answer to the Lord for that. Because it needs to go from its original to its receptor language in an honest and faithful way. So let me move forward just a little bit. And you remember this morning, we had the third thing up there, and that was vulnerability. And we talked a little bit about the fact that there was, that he gives kind of an example here. He talks about verse 6, "For of this sort are they," that's false teachers, "which creep into houses and lead captive silly women, laden with sins, led away with diverse lust, ever learning, never able to come to the knowledge of truth." And then he talks about Jannes and Jambres. And we talked about who they were, and that they were people who rebelled against truth and fought against it. I want you to narrow down just a little bit, and I want you to look specifically at verse 6 with me. Verse 6 in the King James Version says, "For of this sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women, laden with sins, led away with diverse lust." Now, I want you to do something for me. I want you to translate this from Greek to English. Okay? So, can anyone do that? Probably not. There might be somebody here who could make an effort. Ron, did you have Greek? Did you have to take Greek? No? Well, yeah. Me too. Yeah, I had Greek. I crammed 2 years of it into 3 years. I can read that. But even for me, I've got to pull out lexicons and dictionaries and things to help me with that. I'm not fluent in this is called Koine Greek. And I was hoping, we went to Greece a couple of years ago, and I thought, well, maybe when I go to Greece, I'll be able to understand some things. Couldn't understand a thing. I didn't get it. So let me help you out a little bit. And I know this may be a little tough to see, but I'm going to give you something else to help you here. I went ahead and did what's called an interlinear for you. And so I put the meaning of the word there. So again, I know I couldn't get it any larger for you and fit it onto one screen, but if you look at this, it says ek, which is of, ek toiton. Toiton means these, and then gar is the word for. Asen are, oi, thee. Eudunontes is ones or creeping ones, or ones who creep. Ace is into. Tas doesn't really have an equivalent in English. Oikios, houses. Kai is and then you've got some longer words that I will have to work to pronounce. All right? So you see what I did there?